Well, hello everyone, and thank you for coming to our webinar today. This one, we're going to dive into the power of process automation. Tim Aiken, who is the Qualtrics Solutions Engineer, is going to take us through this presentation. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. My name is Karen Arribiaga, and I am an account executive here at Qualtrics. This webinar, we are definitely taking questions and answers at the end. So if you have any, please feel free to put those into the Zoom webinar Q&A section throughout the whole presentation. Sometimes we can answer them as we go. Majority of the time, we'll wait to the end and do a Q&A session there at the end so everyone can hear the questions that are being asked. On top of that, this is going to be recorded. And so if you do want to watch it again, or if you have to leave or want somebody else in your organization to view it, you will get a recording link once this webinar is over and the recording is available. You'll get an email from us with that so you can access it. So without further ado, Tim, I'm going to invite you to come on and take us through the presentation.
Hey, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tim. Like Karen mentioned, I work here at Qualtrics. However, I am going to kind of take a different approach with this talk and kind of come at it with a different angle, because most of the experience that I have is actually as an analyst at a testing lab. I was a forensic chemist for about 9 years before joining Qualtrics. In that role, I was also on the quality team, as an internal auditor and a certified assessor for my accrediting body. So lots of actual hands-on experience doing some of this. Before we get started, I do also want to mention, just as a caveat, that I am a big believer in constant improvement. That also means I'm not a fan of doing things a certain way just because that's always how it's been done. In fact, that particular phrase, "that's how it's always been done," is one of my pet peeves. With all of this in mind, I can't help but try to optimize and streamline the work that I'm doing and the processes that I'm involved in. And I realized that that's going to make it easier for me to try to decide to change processes overnight and try to improve them. But that might not be easy for some of you, and I completely understand that. I'm not trying to, shame you or make you feel any, certain ways about, what I'm going to talk about today. The intent is mostly just to give you guys some ideas and hopefully just give you some things to think about, right? Maybe just some action items that you can move forward with. Now, when I originally gave this particular talk, I was at a conference and I was talking about ways to avoid non-conformances. And I was following a speech that was directly about dry labbing. And in a weird way, I kind of enjoyed following that talk, not because of the dry labbing part, but because, here we're going to talk about answers and solutions instead of just problems. I'm a big believer, having been an analyst in a lab, that most of the analysts want to do good work and are proud of their testing. I've also experienced lots of labs where it's stigmatized or difficult to report issues, whether they're large or small. And that, in my opinion, tends to lead to more problems. Something that you think isn't a big problem, we can ignore maybe, or we just don't report it because you don't feel comfortable and it just keeps happening. That could then explode into something bigger and, cause other issues downstream. So maybe I'm a little optimistic, but I do believe that all of our scientists, we do want to do good quality work. Otherwise, I don't think a lot of us would be here today. So for today's talk, like Karen mentioned, we are going to talk specifically about automation and harnessing that power of automation for the environmental labs. And what I mean by automation in this case is specifically making our quality systems work for us in turn. In doing so, hopefully we'll remove some ambiguity around what to do when quality events happen and make it easier and less stigmatized to report them. Hopefully in the process of all of that, we get more buy-in to the quality system as a whole. And I know that, all of that kind of sounds like a pipe dream initially, but hopefully you'll hang on with me and we can kind of see how all of this will come together. All right, so I hope you'll hear two main takeaways today. First, our quality systems are going to work best when everyone participates. And I know that sounds really obvious, but I think it is harder than we think sometimes. And that directly leads to our second takeaway. Participation should be easy. More people will want to do it. They'll want to be involved if it's easy to be involved and if it directly improves their daily work life. If we can't convince our staff that it's improvement, then we won't get that buy-in. And then, of course, that's going to cascade all the way back down into that scenario where not everyone is participating, and we'll open ourselves up to more issues. Really, making that participation easy, making that or getting that buy-in is really going to be the way that we drive it forward. So quality systems will work best when everyone participates, and we got to make it easy. Now, what I also know is that most people tend to only think about quality when they have a problem, or it could just be all of the paperwork that they have to fill out that goes along with what they do with their daily work. What I'm going to advocate for instead is going to be a system where you don't really have to think about what to do next. The system should preemptively do that next thing or notify you of what that next action to take is. In doing so, we'll hopefully catch those items before they come bigger and properly address the issues so that they don't happen again. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with some real high-level QMS basics, and there's nothing groundbreaking here. And I also realized that there's a lot of ways to cover these. Okay, so we're going to stick at a very high level for this. First, you've got your requirements, right? Those could be TNI. It could be some others too. You might have multiple requirements that you're under. Could be things like ISO 17025, maybe your FDA requirements, local government requirements. Basically, we're just talking about any set of guidelines that you follow, and you have to meet that specific standard for your testing. You have to demonstrate day in, day out that you not only meet this, but you're continuing to meet it and do these things over time. Mostly, we're going to fulfill these requirements with policies, procedures, and other forms of documentation. Next, we've got records, right? And as we meet those requirements, we're going to generate a lot of records that show that we did what we said we were going to do. The records is where things start to get trickier. The main thing that we want to consider here is how we use them to demonstrate compliance. And then, of course, what's the easiest way to store and maintain them so that when it comes time to demonstrate compliance, we're not, running around crazy for the month before trying to get that done. Last is a term that I just completely made up. I refer to these people as quality champions. They're really just the people who are actively working within your quality system. Like I said, I made up that term. It's not an official thing, but what it really is being used for here is to demonstrate what the requirements want of us, right? The standard, those whether it's ISO or TNI, they want everyone in our lab to be a champion for quality and active in that quality system. They do this in a lot of ways, right? Demonstrations of capability, qualifications for your analysts and for the roles that they fulfill within that lab. Basically, we're just making sure that they're trained to do the job and can perform the test to get that desired result. In reality, I think what we find is that when we're looking at a quality system, that quality champion usually just falls to the quality manager, right? Or if you're lucky, to a quality team. And I don't think that this is something, we're obviously not going to change your company culture overnight. And if we're being completely honest, buying software, isn't really going to change this either. But what we can do, hopefully, and I'm imagining that most of the people on the call here are quality related. What we can do is try to make our system work for us, work for our quality champions, whether it's just my quality manager, just my quality team, and maybe unwittingly create more champions in the process, right? And that's what we refer to as that buy-in piece, right? For that continuous improvement of a quality system, we have to get buy-in from the people who are using it. And if we can do that, then maybe we can turn them into more of our quality champions, right? So not trying to force anything down them, just trying to help them to understand, what it is, make it easier for them to do it. And then maybe they want to turn that into being more of a champion. Okay. Demonstrating compliance, right? So we always have to think about the end, right? If I'm in an assessment and I have to demonstrate compliance, everything that I do should make it easier for me to do that, to demonstrate compliance. With fully paper and manual systems, that can be difficult, right? And I love to give this example because I've been here with a fully paper system, and I'll never forget it. It was the first assessment I was ever a part of. It was at a laboratory that I worked for. They were 17025 accredited. And I remember we were preparing for the audit. It was about a month beforehand. And we just had rooms filled with binders that looked like that on that shelf. It was just binder after binder of paper record. And our quality teams, we had a group of about, it was probably about 7 people. They spent that month just going through each of those records and making sure it was complete, right? And it blew my mind at the time. And I was a brand new analyst. I had never been through an assessment before. And this lab was accredited. They were doing great work, fully accredited for many, many years. But I just remember thinking, man, that seems like a waste of time, right? If they're spending that much time just making sure that we've documented that we did what we say we were going to do, that we were missing out on opportunities to improve and to do it better. In fact, I say that phrase that we've always done it this way phrase. It actually directly comes from here because that was a common refrain. We've always done it this way. We've been accredited for a while. Why should we change it? And even though they're compliant, there wasn't a lot of effort going into that making it more efficient or making it work for us better. So I, of course, advocate for the other end, right? Let's see how we can make, all of our record keeping easier so that we can, spend less time on the demonstration side, or, on just double checking things and spending more time on the doing. And that's where automation and specifically electronic records can really start to reward us. And your electronic systems give us some huge wins just by using them, right? In some cases, you can access them anywhere, not just within our laboratory walls, which makes the overall assessment process easier, both for the external assessor and for your team internally. And then, all of my records are also going to be in one place, right? I don't have to go digging around in multiple locations to try to figure out where that thing is. Because it's electronic, it should be designed around reporting and searching to make that easier. But of course, if all I'm doing is housing my documentation in a digital location like a network drive, we're still pretty manual if you think about it, right? Because I'm still scanning and copying and uploading to the drive and making sure that the correct access is there and all of that. I haven't really improved anything with any automation or anything like that. So I prefer taking it even a step further than this. If I have all of the things that I have to do documented, right, and they're in an electronic format, what about when I physically do them, right? Where those records going to be maintained? Are they still on paper? And if they are, where am I going to house them? Or can I just automate that whole process altogether and improve everything, right? And not have to go through any sort of a paper manual process. So if we're going to do this, right, if we're going to start through an automation type of a setup, we, the first thing I think we really need to look at are our documents. It's pretty easy to digitize a document, and that alone is going to make it accessible, right? I can easily take a document, write it up in Word, convert it to PDF, throw it onto a network drive. That alone makes access controlled. I know I can do versioning. It's pretty manual, but I can do versioning there as well. But I think for our real win here, if we're going to really automate this, we've got to look at editing, reviewing, and approving as well. And that's where systems like Qualtrics really start to kind of come to the forefront, right? That's where you start getting those big wins, because we can start setting boundaries to those documents based on our own internal procedures. Right. So if I've written in my procedure who's allowed to make a change, who approves those changes, I can set all of that up around the document within the system. And then once it's built, I can't deviate from it. Right. The system will automatically know the action to take next. It will know who to notify next of what's going to happen, and allow that user to accomplish it directly in the QMS. Right. So now it's not just a file repository. Now it becomes something that actually allows you to work on those documents. And you'll see here what it actually looks like within Qualtrics, what that document control lifecycle is. It walks through the entire process of creating a document, editing the document, publishing it, even retiring it when it's no longer in use. We can even take it a step further and automate tests to go out with the document when you have a revision to show that they've read and understand those changes. So what we intend to do here is eliminate any of the back and forth and chasing down of signatures, right? The system now is driving, right? If I start a document at that create step, it has to go through to edit. It then has to go through to approval before it can hit publish. And all of that, every step of the process is tracked and documented within that quality system. Hopefully, because of this, right, just a real simple automation around one thing, we make it easier to accomplish, right? We're focusing on just who needs to do the work and not the track down of getting the work done. And then it allows your staff to get back to that important testing work that they do, right? They're no longer spending 30 minutes of their day tracking down a signature. They just do their step, move it on through to the next person, and then get back to their normal work. All right, so document control is a great place to start, obviously, but that same automation that we can use with document control, we can use with our other processes as well. And this is where when you start getting into a fully digital automated solution, or an EQMS, like we call it, the system really starts to pay you back, right? Because we've only been talking about so far things that you have to do, right? You've got to do document control. And so we go through the steps of doing that. Here we start getting into, there's multiple ways to do all of our processes, right? If I'm doing audits and corrective actions and equipment maintenance, there's a lot of ways I can do those. I could do them fully on paper, or I could do them electronically in spreadsheets. However, if you have a system like Qualtrics that is designed around automation, we can build the process within the QMS, put framework around it like we did document control, and have all of the records with this exist within the system as well. And like I said, this is where the real gains start to come in. In fact, most of the labs that I work with, or that I've been a part of in the past, the real pain point isn't necessarily the document, right? The physical quality manual or the safety manual, that's not the pain point. That's pretty easy to build and to make and have available. The pain point is all of the records that accompany all of those processes that you do. could be incomplete records, could just be difficult to find. They're spread out throughout the lab and there's no concise way to pull them together. Or maybe you have all kinds of variations of a process because everybody does it just a little bit different, right? So we're never really following our own process internally. All of those ways that we deviate or that we don't quite have a full understanding of our process, that just adds ability to make mistakes. So the adding automation around these processes can drive our improvements forward. And this is where you're going to start to see a lot of that improvement side of things. So we can start with a very easy process, something that you guys all probably know, non-conformances, right? TNI is pretty specific about what you need for this process. Basically, you have to have a process for this and a procedure. It also outlines some basics of what you have to have in that standard. 17025 also outlines it as well. All of your requirements will tell you. So we'll have that procedure in our quality manuals, right, or somewhere else. And that will outline specifically how we're going to handle non-conformances and corrective actions. That controlled document will give me the how, but this diagram that you're looking at right here is going to be the actual doing of the non-conformance, right? And so if we're looking at this diagram, and some of the words might be a little difficult to read, and that's okay. I'll kind of walk you through it. But what we're essentially doing is allowing anyone, anywhere to report an issue, where it happened and who was involved, right? So it's very simple. It's also super approachable. We start this form with just 2 questions, okay? And so anybody who wants to report a nonconformance or an issue will have to answer 2 things. They'll have to answer what happened and what the source of the nonconformance or of the nonconformance was. That means that your users don't have to spend 30 minutes trying to figure out where the form is, answering a lot of questions that maybe don't apply to them or they just don't know the answer to. What we're going to do is just allow them to start it and then move on back to their normal work. This form will immediately be sent to the quality team who can evaluate and determine a course of action to take, right? So the incentive here isn't to make it difficult or to try to make it to where people can't report these. Instead, we're just saying, tell us anything that's going on, right? Any issue you see, just tell us. We'll then review and see what happens based off of that. You'll see after that review step, the next step is to launch corrective action workflows if needed, and then close that workflow out. That launch step is more of that automation, right? I can directly link these workflows together, launch one from another one, and copy data back and forth. So full automation to just make sure when I need to take additional steps, it automatically happens and continues on. You'll also see though that we are directly fulfilling with this workflow, we're directly fulfilling the requirements of TNI, right? There's section 4.9 down there at the bottom, and I've kind of just summarized it, but A through E, making sure that your procedures and responsibilities are defined. All of that is clearly delineated here. At each step, you're identifying who's responsible for that thing. We're evaluating the significance. We can even take that corrective action immediately if we need to by launching it out and working on it. Notifying of the customer, absolutely, when you need to do that. And then resumption of work is all built into the workflow as well. Now, like I said, when we're working through that nonconformance, we get to that part in the middle where we need to launch a corrective action. We can automate that, copy all of the data from my nonconformance, and start my corrective action workflow as well. So based on that information, we launched this new process. And this one I know is a little bit harder to read, but I'll kind of walk you through it as well. It's going to follow directly section 411 over there. So basically designating your authorities, which you will do in your procedures, but is also done here in the workflow. Down at the bottom, that procedures and responsible parties, that's all defined here. The workflow itself starts with root cause analysis, goes on through to develop your action plan, reviewing that plan by your quality teams to make sure it's sufficient, implementing it, the monitoring step, that review for effectiveness at the end, contacting customers, just like with our non-conformance, when we need to, and then closing it out at the end, even a rework step if we need to do anything additional there. So yeah, directly following what we need to do based on those requirements. In fact, you'll also notice in that note down there, this corrective action workflow isn't limited just to the non-conformance. As you know, all corrective actions, non-conformances, you can have them raised from a variety of processes. And so as part of our system, you can raise a corrective action through any of these other processes as well. So non-conforming work, your audits, if you're performing an audit and you have a finding that you need to work through, directly raise that in the audit. It will launch them out, copy all of the data, and then allow you to work through it there. Same thing with management review, feedback, even just plain observations that people have. So yeah, really just trying to make our systems work for us, right? In this whole, going back to this slide, starting here, if we're starting at the very beginning, any individual user can come in here and report an issue, right? And from that, the system, based on how we fill out, how we answer these fields, will either close it out if it's nothing to worry about right now. Maintaining records, obviously, we want to make sure that we can look at this and evaluate over time. But if we need to raise it up, launch the corrective action and go through a more complicated process, bringing in more people and addressing the issues. All of that happens automatically through the automation built into the workflow. All right, so again, let's just look high level and look at our overall process now, because you can see how this QMS is going to look and work, right? And everything is now starting to get tied together. If we start at the document level, we'll have procedures for the laboratory, right? And all of those written documents that we have, those will exist over there in the left-hand corner. From there, we can send acknowledgement tests. They're sent automatically every time we revise a document. So now I'm making sure that my staff understand all of these changes that are happening. Our workflows are built to match those procedures that we have. And this is a key point, which you'll see in a slide in a second, we pre-build a lot of workflows that are designed around the requirements. However, the important thing is that they match your procedures, right? You don't want me telling you how to do your internal audit, right? What you need is a system that's adaptable so that if you do your audit and you have extra information that you need as part of your lab, you need to be able to capture that within the workflow. So any workflow we give can be edited, configured, changed to match what you do, right? So that ability to match the procedures is super important. Once we have those workflows, of course, we're going to automate all of these processes. We'll collect all of the records and all of the data around those. Those workflows will automatically generate email notifications and reminders to the people that are involved to make sure that they stay on top of them. We can even schedule these workflows to be recurring. We can automate them to launch and give them to users to perform, over time. And of course, all of that will be in a centralized repository where all of our records are maintained. We can generate as many reports we want off of this data, right? Since it's all electronic, all of our reports are right here when it comes time for the assessment. And that's really the end goal, right? The reports for the assessments. If everything is here, I need to be able to demonstrate it. And that's where the win should hopefully come in. So like I said, we've pre-configured a range of these workflows for you to get started. we work with our existing customers and the accrediting bodies and our trainers that work with other laboratories like you guys to give you the best place to start, right? You could think of these like templates. You can edit these and change them any way that you might need to. After all, like I said, they do need to match what you say that you are going to do, not what we say that you need to do. And then you can, of course, automate any additional process that you might need to on top of these, right? You can make your own and add this same automation framework to any other process you have. You would just create that workflow process to do it and bring that online to capture your records and all of your details. So findings from internal audits can become your corrective actions to work on, like we mentioned. If equipment maintenance fails or you don't correct the problem after doing that maintenance, you can launch your non-conformance workflow directly and work through it. If I've got a new vendor that needs approved, I can fill out that workflow and route it directly to my quality manager for their review. Really, what we're trying to do is just give your teams the tools that they need to perform the processes they need to perform as you prescribe them in your procedure. Your routing of the work, your notifications, your records, your reports, all of that will be maintained in that one centralized repository. If we look at it from a quality manager's perspective, right, they get a lot of wins here, right, because they know everything is pre-configured to follow the procedure, right? They can't deviate from what you set up as a quality manager. So you have control over your records, you have control over what you're capturing, and it's easy for you to then demonstrate during an assessment how all of that is controlled and how the data source coming in is what's the right word, is reliable. You're also, as an analyst, when you're going into the system, you'll know exactly where it is you go to perform your tasks, right? You're not presented with things that don't relate to you. So if I'm an analyst in one particular section, I don't need all of these workflows. I just need the ones that are relevant to my job. So I can raise a nonconformance, I can perform equipment maintenance, and maybe I'm involved in my demonstration of capabilities every year, right? But I'm not presented with anything that doesn't relate to me or something that I'm not allowed to do. So you're eliminating some confusion there from your user. So so really we're just trying to make it simple, right? Everything that your employees should be doing in here should directly relate to them. They should be easy to perform and just helps them do their job and then move on with the other testing work that they need to do. Now, as I mentioned earlier, buying software isn't really going to make your non-conformances go away, right? That isn't the solution. What it can do is make it easier for you to capture them, to do them, and to track them, right? So if we use that automation to take guesswork out and focus less on the rechecking of records to ensure that we made things right, or that we did it all right, and we spend more time on improving or looking at trends, then we can start eliminating non-conformances, right? If we're incentivizing the front end, let's just report issues and capture data. Then as we see things go over time, we're better able to adapt and to understand what happened. Now, hopefully, like I said, that just gives you guys some ideas for the benefits here, regardless of how you choose to reach that end goal, right? And like I said, I'm not trying to tell you the correct or the best way to do it for your lab. Every lab is different. Every person runs their system a little differently. But I do think, if we take one thing away, the more we can get lab employees to buy into this culture of quality and have it directly affect how they work, I think that's where the improvement in our better, a better lab comes from. In the end, we do want more of these quality champions, right? And I think we can get there if we start with these interconnected automated processes. right? If we can predefine those roles and we can make it to where they don't have to think about what the next step is or who the next person is that needs to do that thing, it just frees them up to perform the work tasks that they need to, right? And of course, there's the output. And this is where we're kind of talking about the unwittingly part, right? If they're capturing all of this and they're doing all of it in one place, you now have that central repository for your entire quality system, right? And all it is reporting. So now they're just helping you champion and be better for that demonstration side at the end. Now, I also realize, this is just a in-person webinar or a virtual webinar, and that there's, a lot of things that we can't, or that I didn't show today, like specifically how that works or is built. If you feel like you want to learn more about this, or if you want to go deeper into any of these sections, by all means, let us know. Ask questions in that Q&A if you have any questions. Really, we are obviously passionate about this. We believe in automation, and we hope that you guys see some things that you could take away from this. So if you have questions, I'd be glad to take some of those at this point. And otherwise, I just really appreciate your time today. And yeah, hopefully we'll hear more from you guys soon. But otherwise, be glad to take any questions. And Karen, I'm not sure if you're on, if you're seeing any questions or if you've got any on your side coming in.
Can you hear me, Tim?
Yep, I can hear you now.
I was on mute. So apologize for that. What I was saying is that I actually really enjoy sitting and watching your perspective of how you kind of take a step back, though you are a Qualtrics employee, of let's look at why electronic quality management systems as a whole are going to be beneficial and such. Out of curiosity, right? And this is probably my own personal question to you. When do you think organizations should consider purchasing a QMS? At what point, is that a time for them to think, okay, now it's time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where I kind of, maybe people like you on the sales side might get upset with me. Honestly, for labs can't just stop testing, right? It's not something that you can do. And so the real true answer is that there isn't really a great time, if we're being honest, right? There's anytime you're adapting to change, you have to prioritize that change. Now, sometimes you're forced to change, obviously, if you have maybe the standard changes and requires new things that you can't do. And so you want to bring in a more robust solution. That would be a change to the whole culture of compliance that you would need to get with. Other times, I think you just know based on the amount of time that you're spending, dealing with, records, dealing with performing audits. If it is very difficult for you to demonstrate compliance during an assessment, that might just be a clue.
A red flag.
Yeah, that you need some kind of help. So I think it varies for everybody. The bottom line is change is always difficult, especially for laboratories. It's hard to change like that. So it is kind of evaluating what's my set of problems, and am I better off making this change to make improvements, right? Mm-hmm. And that is something that we're really good at talking through. We've got people internally on staff that have done, I personally have implemented Qualtrics in a lab, and we have other people who have used Qualtrics in laboratories. So we know some of those things to look out for. So if you are wondering that question, by all means, reach out and we can kind of chat through specifics related to your laboratory.
Absolutely. We are, if you've ever worked with us, I know that we've got a mixture of different types of people on the webinar today. We have some customers, I see the customer questions coming in, and we have some people that are either brand new to Qualtrics and figuring out what we do, or are actually considering bringing us into their laboratory on the call. And in our conversations with you, we are always very upfront and honest about, does this make sense to automate? Does it make sense from a laboratory standpoint, from a time standpoint. And so we're always happy to have those conversations. So if you do want to get more information, I will point out we also have a 30-minute webinar that we host every other week. You can find the link on our website if that's something that you're interested in seeing, as well as you can reach out to myself at Karen@qualtrics.com, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with somebody, if it's not myself, to show you the system. All right, Tim, I've got a question from Emily. Does Qualtrics have a procedure/workflow for confidential reporting of data integrity issues within a laboratory?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have a pre-built one for that. And there's one thing that would kind of maybe not work for the confidential side. In order to use workflows within Qualtrics, you do have to have a login. And so anytime you initiate a workflow, it's tied to the login that's using it. So you would, if you reported an issue, it would come from you, and you would be in that history to see that happened. Of course, if that's not a problem, then that would be fine. There would be ways around that. Like, for instance, you could create a unique login for reporting these issues, something like, just thinking out loud, if you had an email, you can make a fake email address that was like report@qualtrics.com and would just have a generic username. The instructions would then be use this login to report that issue, and then it would be an anonymous submission that way. So there would be ways to do it around how you would kind of log into the system to report that issue, but it would have to be tied to a login of some kind, if that makes sense. And I'd be happy to chat that specifically through if you need to. You could imagine it looking like the non-conformance workflow, just with that generic login to report the issue. The other side of that, of course, is that those logins can only be used by one person at a time. So if I was in using it, reporting an issue, and somebody else logged in, it would log me out. So that would be something to consider as well, but something that could happen.
Great. And here's another question from Virginia. When using the workflow launcher, I understand whomever initiated the first workflow will be the initiator of all subsequent workflows initiated via the launcher. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. That is how the system is currently made. So if I initiate a nonconformance and we launch a corrective action, it would show me as the initiator of the corrective action as well. That is something that I think, have been evaluating if we want to try to rework. I'd have to double check that, but I think there's some talk about trying to see if that's going to be if there's some improvements we can do there. So yeah, currently, yes, if you initiate the nonconformance, it will show in your inbox that you initiated that corrective action as well. Yeah, great question though.
Yeah. Any other additional questions out there?
Okay.
Well, Tim, I don't see any coming in. Thank you so very much for leading this discussion today. I thought that there were some really good, ideas, in your presentation, and some takeaways that we can all kind of learn from. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and continue to look out for more webinars from us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.